Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jason Knight, and each week I'll be speaking to some of the finest minds in tech and product, hearing their stories and listening to some of their great advice for the rest of us. In this week's episode, Beyond Perseus, we'll be talking leadership. We'll cover product leadership, the importance of having a good manager and mentor, the importance of being a good manager and mentor. We'll discuss why a product needs a seat at the executive table and the importance of building a high-performing product team. We'll also talk about life in Toronto, one of my favourite cities, and try and agree on the virtues of stop-motion animation versus CGI monstrosities. If this sounds good, please join us for One Night in Product. So my guest tonight is Saeed Khan, product consultant, coach, speaker and founder at Transformation Labs based in Toronto. Hello, Saeed.
Hey, Jason, how are you?
I am very well, thank you. So I came to know Saeed a few months ago when I was looking at various pieces of his online content, webinars. He's also the leader of a Product Leaders Slack channel, which I joined and find some fascinating hints and tips in there. One of Saeed's first talks that I saw was a memorable talk called Release the Kraken, which is a fantastic name. And the first question, obviously, that arises from that, and possibly the most important question of tonight is, which of the Clash of the Titans films is your favorite, and who's your favorite Kraken?
So I'll say I'm old enough to have seen the original Clash of the Titans from way back in the 80s, I guess it was. And I liked that one when I was younger. And then there was a newer one with Sam Worthington, and again, not bad. So I don't know if I have a favorite. I've seen the newer one several times, and I kind of like it. So maybe that's my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I'm not as much a fan of the new one. I think from my perspective, I'm a big fan of the old style kind of stop motion stuff, and just it just feels a bit more cool, or maybe it's just my massive retro kick. But what can I say?
So I was just going to say, for the time, that stop motion animation was great. It was
absolutely, yeah.
It's what we had back then. So yeah, I can appreciate that.
It's like a minimum viable animation or something like that, right? So you're based in Toronto, which is a fantastic city. How's the product scene in Toronto these days? Is there like a big startup culture over there? Is it kind of up and coming, or is it kind of well established?
No, it's great. It's probably somewhere between up and coming and well established, if that makes any sense. So, we've always been had a smaller tech community than other places in the U.S. So Boston or Bay Area or Seattle. But in the last, I would say, let's call it 10 years, there's been a huge acceleration in both companies from Toronto and from Canada establishing themselves here, but also from other companies from other parts of the world, the US particularly, opening office here. So, recently we've had big openings from Google and Amazon and Microsoft and other companies. And I mean, Microsoft's been in Canada for a long time, but just expansion of their footprint here. So, it's I think it's great. There was a statistic, and I'm still personally a little skeptical, but I've seen it multiple times, that there were more high-tech jobs created in Toronto, I think it was in 2019 or 2018, than in the Bay Area and Boston combined, or something like that. Like, it was just, it's just a huge explosion. So I think it's a really good time and a really good high-tech scene here.
And is the Ontario government very receptive to, I don't know, like sort of removal of barriers for kind of startup culture, or do you have to kind of compete on a level playing field with much bigger companies over there?
Well, there has always been a lot of support for R&D in Canada, right? I mean, don't forget the telephone was invented here. That wonderful device we all use and carry with us now every day. But no, we've had this long history, quite honestly, in Canada. Nortel, everyone has heard of Nortel, and of course, BlackBerry RIM was a big company, not technically in Toronto, but just outside of Toronto. So there's always been that, but those were the few exceptions that people heard of, and there wasn't a huge sort of base to build on. You'd get these amazing unicorns, and that would be it. And oftentimes, a lot of companies would start here and then, either move to the U.S. or get acquired and become part of an American company. So we didn't have that kind of critical mass to grow into that middle space, sort of the mid-size scale kind of stage of companies. And that's changed. That's changed significantly. And the government has helped. I mean, there are lots of different incentives for things, but I think the reality is that we've got some great universities, right? We've got, University of Waterloo, which is where I went, University of Toronto, McMaster University. There's a whole bunch of these universities with great graduates coming out. And I worked in the U.S., right? Not right after I graduated, but I went to the U.S. I worked there for a number of years, then came back. And I think the impetus to go to the U.S. has been reduced just because we have a much better critical mass here. And so it's sort of building on itself. Yeah, there's the government programs that help. There's just this history of high tech in Canada, and now we're getting this growth. And now it's not us going somewhere else; it's people coming here, right? We're getting a lot of people from other countries coming, particularly to Toronto, but also to other places, Montreal or Vancouver, etc., for these tech jobs.
Yeah, I think historically it's always been kind of understood that places like Toronto and other sort of Canadian cities are like just a generally kind of high quality of life over there as well. So I guess that's pretty attractive if you've got the tech scene kind of lined up as well for people to land in as well. So sounds like it's a really positive time.
Yeah, and quite honestly, not to get political, but the last few years of kind of politics in the U.S. has certainly been helpful to Canada for people looking for some place to come and be a bit more stable. So there's a lot of different factors, I think. And I was actually having a conversation with someone about a week ago on this, and we were both just amazed at like just even 5 years ago the difference, right? And you look at not they're originally based in Ottawa, but they have a big presence in Toronto. But Shopify has just exploded right in the last couple of years. And there's a bunch of companies like that are on their way. So it's really a good sight to see. I'll be honest with you.
That's great. So Transformation Labs, if I were to boil this down into product speak, what problem does Transformation Labs solve for me or for our listeners or for companies?
So if I can be a bit of a self-promoter for a minute,
that's why we're all here, right?
The real problem I think we're seeing is because of this growth, right? And it's not just in Toronto, it's in other people, this growth in tech, this focus on product now, right? Everyone wants to, become product centric or product driven. And it's still a young kind of profession. And there aren't a lot of people who've had this experience, right? And, I've been working in tech for 30 years. Like literally I graduated from university. I had computer science jobs, while in university. I've been in product management for over 20 years. So, I worked here, I worked in the US, public company startups. So there's people like me as well. I'm not saying I'm unique in any way. But there's people like me who've been around for a long time, who've seen, a lot of the ups and downs. And my goal is really to help other companies succeed and not have to go through all the pain and hurdles that, previous companies had to, right? There's no point reinventing the wheel. And product is complex, it's dynamic, it's changing, but there are definitely better ways of doing things. And so I like to say that I help bring that insight to companies and help them accelerate their product success, help them accelerate how their organizations can succeed as well.
So are you working a lot with startups or sort of enterprises that are trying to be more product focused, or is it some kind of mixture, or how does your sort of general profile of client look?
Yeah. Generally speaking, I've worked with small to mid-sized companies. Large enterprise, I worked in large enterprise software. I worked for Informatica for a number of years. What I've found is they have a different set of problems, and they often look for a different type of help than I provide. So, although if there's any large enterprise listening, I'll be happy to.
You never know.
But and obviously, given that I'm in Toronto, a lot of my clients in Toronto, but not exclusively. I've done work for U.S. companies as well. But it's really that early stage of learning how to do things right. So I've worked with startups to help them do product research. They don't know how to do it well. They kind of do it. They've done it a little bit, but they want to know how to do it right. Or how do we go to market better? We can build things, and most companies can build, but it's when they go to market that they fail. So how do they position the message? Or how do they create a product strategy? Everyone's got a roadmap. Not every roadmap though is a real roadmap. It's more like a bit of a wish list. So how do we do it right? So what we put on our roadmap is really tied to our business objectives and kind of helps us succeed, right? Because if we do the right things with that roadmap, that drives all the downstream activities. So it's really how to get those problems solved, and then on an organizational side, it's really how do we build a product organization? A lot of companies hire people, and they're smart people, and but they're not a real well-run organization, right? In the right roles with the right skills, doing the right things at the right time. So to me, in a way, I'm kind of like an efficiency expert for product.
So I think we said in the preamble, it's like you're almost like the product owner of product companies in a way. It's like your product and your output is effective product organization at scale.
Yeah, I that's a way to describe it. I just and this is the bit of the Canadian kind of biased person in me. I want to help Canadian companies succeed as well. I love the growth here. I don't have a preference for where my clients are. Like I said, I worked with companies in the U.S. as well. But there is, I've lived here all my life, except for that time I lived in the U.S. And I really feel a little kind of sense of, pride that I'm helping these companies in the country I live in. So it's nice to see all this growth, because for a long time there wasn't any. When I started in product management, which was back in 1997, as I tell people, it was a millennium ago. There were honestly, I don't know the number, but there were probably a couple of dozen high-tech product managers in the city. Like, I honestly don't know, but it was a very tiny community.
And I'm assuming that product management in general was very different at that time as well. I mean, I've probably been working in and around product for say like the last 10 years, and it's changed a lot even in that time. So it feels like if you're looking back even further than that, then I'm imagining that it was very different. I mean, what do you think the main differences are now compared to then?
Well, this is this interesting question, and I was asked this once recently as well, and I've thought about it. And I'll be honest with you, in a way, it was a lot more comprehensive and a lot less confusing. And the reason I say that is because, first of all, when I told my family, I had worked in a software company prior, and I wanted to get into product management. And I told my family, if you know of anyone, like if you hear of a product management job, let me know, and not that any of them would have had real contacts, but one day this job appeared in the paper, believe it or not. That's how long ago it was, right? That's when we looked in the newspaper for jobs. But it was for a product manager at a software company, and my sister-in-law called me and said, "Oh, look on page whatever. There's this job," and so. And then, the next question is, so what exactly is a product manager? and I explained it to them, and they're like, oh, okay, whatever, like, great, hope you get the job. But that lack of knowledge externally wasn't a problem internally. Like in the company I went to work in, they really had a very clear definition of product management, and there was very little ambiguity. And it was a very holistic role in terms of business plus technology plus market, et cetera. It was, I feel very privileged to have had that particular role as my first product management role, because it really gave me a very holistic view of product, and I had a really great manager. I can't thank him enough. And now though, we've got, product managers, obviously product marketers, we've got product owners, we've got product designers, we've got product this, product, there's, and then all these different flavors. There's, growth product managers and platform product managers and this. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I think for the uninitiated, it's a real confusing place to go into, right? And what's the difference? Why are there all these different things? And I'll be honest with you, and this is my bias, and if you've read anything about what I've written online, it shouldn't come as a surprise, but I think the whole product owner concept from Agile has really made a big mess of things too, both in terms of the name, because they don't actually own the product, but secondly, because that role has been inserted and in fact, overlapping into product management in a way that is not easy for many companies to reconcile. Uh, and so I think all this kind of confusion has led to a problem that we didn't have 20 years ago, quite honestly. Because you did it all. Like who is this? The product manager. Who this is? The product manager. But at least there was clarity on the responsibility and the focus. And whereas now there's so many different uh, potential ways and titles and approaches that I find that companies really need help uh, kind of sorting through that. And a lot of them come through the agile training first. They go through the quote agile transformation.
Ha. Or
And
the certified Scrum owners or certified
yeah,
Scrum product owners and
yeah.
stuff like that.
I don't want to disparage that because I know the intent and I know there's a real kind of objective there, but it doesn't solve the problem for companies. And so now they've gone down a path that they thought was leading them somewhere. It didn't get them to where it was, and now they have to find a new path. But they can't just start from scratch. They can't just go back to where they were. They have to. They have this org. They have this set of responsibilities, and they have to start changing that. And I find that often is a barrier because it's not starting from the right place. And so and I don't use this term a lot, but I've been thinking about sort of defining it better. But they need to go through a product transformation, and they need to understand that that's different. That's very different, and it's different in some very fundamental ways. And it's a different skill set for many people, and they don't have training in it. So how do they build all that up? So it's a very different challenge than, let's say, 20 years ago.
So that leads me on to obviously thinking of some of the companies you've worked for and some of the goals that you have. Like, what would you consider the hallmarks of a good product culture within a company?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So first of all, I'm just thinking back to some of my blog posts on this from many years ago. The first one is product has a seat at the table, right? There's an understanding of what product means, and that there's a product leader, a true product leader who has a seat at the executive table, right? So it used to be the case many years ago, and it was the case when I started that the product managers report into marketing or the product managers report into engineering or something like that. And that's still the case today in many companies. But in reality, you can't claim to be a product oriented company and then say, yeah, and the product leadership reports into another group, right? It has to be a product group. And when I say product, I don't just mean necessarily, a small group of product managers with, say, a VP. What I mean is that there has to be this sort of holistic view of product. Because the one big difference between product and other organizations in the company, like marketing or sales or finance or services, etc., is that we work truly holistically, cross-functionally across the organization, right? That's what we have to do. And so, A, we can't be underneath another org, but B, when we are sitting at the table, we're not just a single silo along with other silos. And I'm not, again, disparaging the other groups. I'm just saying that the function of product is different in that cross-functional focus, right? And so we have to have that autonomy to work across these groups to help align them and to help drive the company forward to product success. And and so you need leadership who understands that. And this is another problem I've seen is that oftentimes, yes, you have a product org, you have a product leader, let's say a VP of product, but that person came from engineering or that person has never actually worked in a true cross-functional manner and doesn't understand that or isn't empowered to do that. And that's to me a recipe for failure of the product organization. And like you said, I think like we're what we're chatting earlier, you'd said that product gets it from all sides, right? So, if you don't have that autonomy or that authority to work across and influence groups, then you're not going to succeed, and you're still going to get it from all sides, right? So it's funny how, on one hand, the criticism can come cross-functionally, but the impact doesn't happen cross-functionally, or can't happen because of the way it's set up. I think those. I mean, we could get into lots of little details, but I think that's the most critical thing as a hallmark, as you said, for a product-led organization.
Hmm. So I guess that would kind of cover the kind of advice that you'd give to effectively the leadership of an organization. But do you have any kind of, I guess, key tips or like immediate advice for, say, product leaders that are trying to play that VP role or to try and lead the product organization within a company?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a good follow-up. So first of all, I'll say this: we talk product, and product has many aspects, right? And within a product org, there can be UX, there can be design, there can be other roles. It's not just strictly product managers. But one thing is, people who have a title of product, okay, should be in the same org, and this is my view. So it's funny how in many companies, product management is considered product, but product marketing is considered marketing. And the funny thing is, why is that? Why is that we put so much emphasis on the first word in the first case, and so little emphasis on the same word in the second case, right? Because to me, product marketing is strategic marketing at the product level. The goal of product marketing is the same goal of product management. It's product success or driving product success within the company. So I see that as a challenge sometimes, where companies have product management, product marketing in these separate orgs, and they aren't aligned. They aren't aligned in objectives, aren't aligned in actions, and yet somehow they're supposed to work together. I think the other one is, let's look at product management itself, right? Again, two words: product and management. So the emphasis goes on product, meaning the building of the product. But what's the management, right? People should understand that word management, that's actually the main word. It's management of product, right? Product is the modifier. So what is the management that's actually happening in your company that's owned by the product management group? Because if all it is building product and handing it off to a marketing group or something like that, you're not really doing much management, quite honestly.
Yeah, I guess there's the argument that if you're not playing too much of a strategic role, that you're really just almost like a waiter taking orders, and people are coming to you with some requests, and you're just kind of feeding them through.
Well, yeah,
Which,
that could be it. But also, as an example, if you only look at it from that perspective, your objective is not product success. Your objective is product delivery, which is not the thing you should be focusing on, right? And because again, you're missing that cross-functional view of the company and aligning them. And I think this is a challenge in a lot of companies because they start off without this kind of understanding, because it sounds really easy. Yeah, these are the ones who build the product, and those are the ones who market the product, and those are the ones who sell the product or whatever. But it can't be the case, because literally, I mean, quite honestly, I'll say this: the people who are building the product are engineering, right? I mean, product management is driving that, but the impact of product management doesn't stop at the engineering level, right? All those insights, the personas, the market sort of drivers, all those things have to flow across the company and align, right? So there's a lot of work that product management does that can assist and influence the work that these other groups do and bring that alignment, right? And that's often missing, right? I mean, look at marketing and sales. There's all this talk about marketing and sales alignment. Why? Because they have to work together, because there's a dependency, and they're working towards some common goals. Well, the world doesn't start at marketing, right? There has to be alignment across the board: product, marketing, sales, service, externally with partners. All those things need alignment. Now, you're not going to get perfect alignment, but if you really think about what elements are common across those, they're common in what you build, why you build it, who you market it to, who you sell it to, how do you package it, all those things. So that's where product management can come in and help drive that. And I see that, like, when people talk about alignment, intrinsically they go, yeah, that makes sense. When it comes down to how it should be done, oh, no, 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 product management, they have to work with engineering. Well, who else is better to drive that, because they're the first people who are uncovering all of that. So they should be the ones who are passing it through and helping and working. And in some companies where that does happen, I'll be honest with you, and I worked in one, and Informatica, I'll use as an example, was pretty good at it. We weren't perfect. But when we got our organization structured well, having product marketing and product management together, having a clear understanding that there was a common purpose and driving that through the company, it really made a huge difference. Like, I can't tell you without, another half hour of explanation, but it really made a huge difference. And I just can't emphasize that enough for companies to really think holistically about aligning your organization, and doing it from a product centric point of view. And maybe that's where the problem comes in, because maybe when people think of product centric, they think of just building product. But I would say maybe it's a product success centric point of view, right? We're all driving towards product success because product success means company success. We may have different lenses on what that means, but we're all aligned in that, and there's a holistic view of it across the company, and that's how we become truly product centric.
Yeah, no, it's a really great point. And I think that it's almost like, because so many product people seem to come from sort of engineering and development backgrounds, because that's a very traditional way in, kind of feels in some ways that that's almost like a safe space for them to look at, because that's where they've been. And certainly I've come from sort of a software development background before moving into product, and people that are working in those areas may not have as much experience, say, in product marketing or sort of client management or user interviews. But I think one of the biggest takeaways has always been, you've got to do some of everything. And there's this whole kind of thing about how product people are T-shaped or generalists, and kind of not an expert at anything apart from obviously an expert in their product, but that they have to be good enough to be able to kind of fight in all of those different arenas rather than just kind of stick into one.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think we are an expert in something. I hope we are is not just in our product itself, but an expert in product management, right? Like there is a domain and there is a skill that's independent of all these other things that we do in understanding how to do that job well. And I'll be honest with you, okay, I've been in product for 20 something years. When I look back at that very first product management job, and even the second or third one that I had, I can see a lot of blind spots that I had. I can see a lot of things I didn't know because, like everyone else, I moved into it. There was no formal training. I took the pragmatic marketing class way back then, which, great, 2 days. And then what? Like, am I an expert? No. So that domain knowledge of product management and how to execute, how do you create product strategy? How do you define a really good product roadmap, right? How do you do proper product planning, prioritization, et cetera? How do you understand go-to-market? How do you optimize, post that? How do you customer research? I mean, there's this whole spectrum of really difficult things to do well, and you have to do them well along with all the other, business planning and other things that you're doing. So I think that is a real skill. And I know people who've come from engineering into product and been successful, but I've also seen people who are not successful. And I don't have enough data to say what the real problem was, because they're all very smart people. But having a shift in mindset, maybe having a really good mentor when you first came in to really help you do some of those things, maybe having, the right context in terms of the products you're working on or the product spaces you're working in. There's a whole bunch of factors that fall into it. But it's a difficult discipline. And it's even harder for, let's say, a leader who comes in who may not have spent 10 years doing it themselves, right? We need someone senior who can manage a team, who understands the product and the technology. Okay, Fred, let's bring you over here and, we'll help you out. I won't say it's a recipe for failure, but it's definitely a problem to try and be successful in that without all the right supports. And I think that's where, I've seen where I can help companies, but I think that's where in general product orgs tend to fail because you would never bring in a marketing leader. Well, maybe you would, I don't know, who's never done marketing, right? Or you'd never bring in a sales leader who's never done sales, right? So, I look at the analogies in companies. Like, would you bring in a CFO who was never a finance person, but they're really smart and capable and can figure it out? No, you never would. So I think the same is true here. You really need to have people who are at the top of a product org who've done it, who, who've been successful, and maybe even had failures because you learn a lot from failures. But then also who can instill all that into the people below them, because that's the other side of it, right? You're not a successful leader unless your team is successful. And if you can't lead your team to success, then how are you going to be successful, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of it. I agree with a lot of that. Like as a kind of a product leader, your job is really to set the organization or set your product organization up for success, and kind of give them the support and the safety to make good product decisions, and kind of help them to grow and defend them and defend their time, and make sure that they're being pushed in the right areas. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just use it again. His name was Dwayne, and I totally. I mean, I see a lot of my success in my career through him, and he was my first product management, boss. Right? He was VP of marketing and company, but he had come from a product background as well. And he was a great manager because he did a lot of things you just described. But boy, when I needed help, I didn't know how to do something. He knew exactly what needed to be done, and he would guide me, and it came through having done it before, right? Like when we're doing new product research, like he had done it and he understood how to do it, and he really helped me clarify what I need to do, right? When I had to redo pricing on a complex product, right? He helped me figure out what I need to do, and how I should talk to finance, and the kinds of questions I should be thinking about, etc. So that experience was amazing because it wasn't, hey, Saeed, if you have a question, let me know, but you got to figure it out yourself or whatever. Like there's none of that, or, oh, I've never done that. Let's see if we can figure it out together. Like it was a great mentoring leadership situation. And I just look back and I wonder, like, had I not had someone like him, and quite honestly, had I had some of my other bosses that I had later in my career, what would have been the outcome? And I'm almost certain it wouldn't have been as positive and as impactful on me. So I always look at that, and then I always think, what would Dwayne do? I really do. I've asked my question this a few times, and I see that image of how he did things and why he did things, and it really kind of, I don't know if everyone's had a boss like that, but I think it was a real privilege to have someone like him, and especially in that very first job.
Yeah, I think it's almost like how some people remember that their favorite teacher at school or something like that, like the one that really helped them to thrive. And I think certainly from my perspective, I've of course had good bosses and bad bosses, and I'll definitely not name any of them on either side because I don't want them to either feel too good about themselves or too bad about themselves. But yeah, I think that definitely my most productive times have been when you've had that cover and that ability to grow, and that kind of expertise to fall back on. So I think that the big takeaway from all of this is that either you need to get a good product leader to guide you, or you need to be a good product leader and guide your team.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, because we don't have formal education in this, because there's so many different dynamics, and yes, it is different from company to company, although not as different as people think. Um, I think all those things are factors, and there's a lot of potential for real benefit for companies if they do things well, and then there's a lot of potential for just harm, and I've seen it. I mean, I have the privilege of looking into companies, and I maybe 8 or 10 a year that I work with. And I get to see the insides. I get to see the good and the not so good. How the sausage is made, and and quite honestly, I mean, there've been a couple of companies where on the outside these companies look great. Like their messaging is great, their website is good, they've got their product looks really rock solid. They've got customer references and all this stuff. And then you go inside and you're like, oh my goodness, like it's like night and day. Like how is this company that looks dysfunctional internally appearing like they've got their act together, right? And it's just sheer. I use the term heroes. There are heroes in those companies who are making things happen. But boy, if that company tried to scale, they would not be able to scale well because, or if a couple of those heroes left, they would be in real trouble. And that's not how you want to structure a company or an organization, right? That is heroics that are, it's like, the Clash of the Titans, right? If it wasn't for Perseus, would have been a very different outcome, right? You don't want Perseus to like leave, right? So
yeah, but also similarly, you couldn't win a war against the Persian army with just Perseus as well, right? You need to the scaling point. You need to have lots of people to do that sort of thing, and
exactly.
You can't just scale one team member. I think that's.
Yeah.
I have actually literally used the phrase "heroism doesn't scale" before as a kind of as a kind of talking point, because you need to build, I guess, structures around this stuff, and you need to build, I think, as we touched on earlier, like some type of culture that supports your goals and not just rely on the fact that one person in the team is amazing.
Yeah, I use this phrase outcomes over outputs, right? There's as well, and that phrase gets thrown out quite a bit, and and it's great, right? But it's also motherhood and apple pie. Like obviously you want outcomes and not just production of things, but the question is how do you do that? How do you get your whole team focusing on and achieving outcomes? Right? It's not just, hey guys, we're going to focus on outcomes now. Here's some OKRs, right? Like it's really something more fundamental to that. And I work backwards from that. And I say, yes, outcomes are what you want. Outputs are what you create. And there's nothing wrong with outputs. But if you don't have the right actions to create those outputs, and if you don't have the skills to perform those actions, you'll never create the outputs and you'll definitely never get the outcome. So in order to understand like how to create a great team, you have to kind of decompose it back to, do we have the right people in the right roles with the right skills doing the right things to produce the right outputs and to drive outcomes, and that sounds like a consultant kind of blurb, right? Like that. But it is absolutely true. And you can use any analogy you want, right? Like we can use a sports analogy or we can use something else. But, how do teams win in a sport?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the outcome is the win. The output, let's say, is goals. If you're playing hockey or something like that. The actions are the plays that they have and how they respond to the opposing team. And the skills are all the fundamental things they have to do. And so, I understand all that, but put me on skates and I can skate. I've lived in Canada for a long time. I played hockey as a kid. But do I have the skills? Do I have those plays? Do I have the ability to, interact with all the other players properly? No. Right?
I'm pretty sure you could probably still get into the Leafs team now.
Well, no, I have my doubts there too. But you know what I mean? Like that kind of thinking, particularly about product, because it's so complex, doesn't happen very much. And you really need to think of it at that level so that you can get people doing the right things. Because I'll just use an example. I work with companies to do customer research and discovery, and they're doing all the right things. Like they're having interviews or they're asking questions and doing all that. But when it comes to, are they asking the right questions? Are they speaking to the right people? Are they pulling out all the insights correctly? Are they making the right decisions to drive what they need to do? Like all those little details matter, and every one of those is like, if you think of a funnel, every one of those is a drop-off point. And every one of those that you're not doing well, you're losing out. And so what comes out of that discovery process often is a inconclusive or very weak set of requirements. And then what happens is, well, that's what we got. Let's go build something, Like boy, those skills and those actions did not drive the outcome and the outputs that you needed. And so that's where I spend time working with people. How do you get those skills and those actions so you can get those outcomes? How do you do that for product planning, etc. So, I mean, to me, that's a fundamental approach I think that leaders have to take. And again, if you haven't been in the trenches and done this and really understand it, it makes it much more difficult to help your team reach where they have to get.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really valid point that you need to. I don't want to say you need to be able to. I think I listened to a podcast once. I can't remember from where, so apologies in advance to whoever wrote that podcast. But like, there's this concept of like being able to zoom in and zoom out and kind of set the level of focus and have the ability to focus on all of the different levels depending on the need. And I think that, like you say, without the ability to actually perform those tasks and having lived that, then it's always going to be difficult.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've heard that analogy before, and I forget where I heard it.
Some much more popular podcast than this one, no doubt. So where can people find you, Saeed, if they want to come and drink from the tap of wisdom?
So they can go to the website. It's transformationlabs.io, not .com, but .io.
It's good if it's a .io, right? I mean, that's where all the cool companies are.
All the cool cats are on .io. And then I'm on LinkedIn. I don't know. I think it's LinkedIn. Saeed W. Khan is probably the last part of it.
I'll pop the link in the description.
Okay. And on Twitter, it's Saeed W. Khan. So although a friend of mine told me on Twitter, I tend to tweet less about product and more about politics lately. But I think that's the world we're living in right now, and certainly the situation we're in warrants that a bit. But I'm trying to balance out the product versus non-product Twitter.
Yeah, well, in theory, at least some of that political conversation might fade away in November, right? Give or take, but I guess we'll see.
We'll see. I mean, even in Canada, the U.S. election is a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's going to be an interesting ride. So, no, thanks very much, Saeed, for spending the time today. I think it's been really good to sort of get some of that top-level sort of leadership, consultancy type opinion and kind of some of the best practices and some of the stuff that you've learned, and hopefully that'll be really useful for some of our listeners as well. So I can only thank you for spending the time.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it, Jason, and I thank you for having me on.
No worries. Thank you very much. As ever, thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed the show today, I'd love it if you left a review, shared it with your friends, subscribed or followed the show on Facebook, Instagram or LinkedIn. I've also got a mailing list which will send exactly one message a week with a summary of the latest show and any other quality product content that's piqued my attention over the last week. If that sounds good, sign up at onenightinproduct.com, and that's night with a K. Thank you very much.